Hi, everyone. My name is Ben Wright Human, cartoonist extraordinaire, and welcome to the continuing series, the Flight Plan to Space. Okay, great.
Off to a great start.
Trip it up. Joining me today is the fantastic Kelci Crawford.
Oh my gosh, that's me. Yes. That's
Kelci
me.
and I
Yes.
have actually worked together quite a bit. They have been involved in a bunch of my projects. They also are the artist on the webcomic Validation and write and draw the comic The Legend of Jamie Roberts and run Fantasyville Productions. Say hi, Kelci.
Hi, Kelci.
So part of what's funny is Kelci and I are both interviewers. Like, we actually do this a lot on our own streams. And we had a conversation while figuring out how to do the Flight Plan to Space stuff. We've never really interviewed each other, even though we've been on streams together a lot.
Yeah, we never have. So today's episode is going to be interesting.
Yeah. Oh, I just realized something I forgot to put up. One thing that we are doing all of this for is the Small Press and Alternative Comic Expo, better known as S.P.A.C.E. The information is now at the bottom of the screen. This is a really great indie show. Happens every year. It is in the Ohio Expo Center this weekend, the 10th and 11th. And we just really have wanted to show a lot of love for this show. It's been going on a little over 20 years at this point. Is one of the major indie draws for Columbus. And we partially wanted to support it because it's had a rough couple of years, as have a lot of cons. And we just want to try and get the word out and get you to know people that are involved with the con and people who are going to be showing up there. And Kelci is specifically splitting the table with me. So it seemed like a good opportunity.
Yeah. Also, fun fact, since this is the kind of an interviewee episode, fun fact for you, S.P.A.C.E., pretty sure it was S.P.A.C.E. 2013 was the first year that it was the first ever show that I exhibited as an exhibitor, showcasing and selling my stuff.
That's awesome. I actually didn't know that.
Yeah.
So you've seen it for 10 years at this. This is your 10th space, or not? Maybe I don't know if you did it every year.
There was a section of time where I was not exhibiting at S.P.A.C.E. But S.P.A.C.E. was my first convention selling period. And then I started returning on a regular basis, probably 2015, 2016. But there was a short little gap where I didn't exhibit.
Yeah. And you and I met for the first time at S.P.A.C.E. 2018.
Yes, I remember this because we met at S.P.A.C.E. And then the weekend after that was Wrathicon, and we ended up across from each other, and we were like, didn't we just see each other at S.P.A.C.E.?
Yeah, it was the Spider-Man pointing meme.
Yeah, it was the Spider-Man pointing meme.
Yeah.
And then, I shit you not, swearing. But the weekend after Wrathicon, so we saw each other at S.P.A.C.E., we saw each other at Wrathicon, and then the weekend after that was Three Rivers Comic Con, and you were situated behind me.
Yeah. We kept having cons near, we were so close in proximity. Yep. And honestly, that's where we started talking, because it was literally one of those situations where you were behind, but we were like in the same block.
Yep.
And I remember one of the funny things was like, man, are you just like following me? Don't tell me you're going to be at Put and Play, which was this one-off, really bizarre con up in Put-in Bay, Ohio, which is a little like resort island on Lake Erie.
Oh, yeah.
And somehow there were probably like maybe 24 vendors that went to that thing all together. And the two of us had signed up for it.
And two of us signed up for it. Yeah. And it was, I think it was Chloe who told me about it, actually. I had not heard about the show until she told me about it. And then we were like, okay, let's give it a shot. And you did a comic in Cospain that referenced that show.
I did.
Yeah.
I did. Yeah. That was a lot of fun. Actually, what was really funny about it is, like, I didn't name the show, but a lot of people who'd been there or had heard me talk about it knew what I was talking about.
Oh, yeah.
Chloe, who's another one of our friends who was a tabler who happened to be at that event, messaged me after the last page of that saying, did that last part happen? I didn't hear about that. And what was crazy is that story is the only one of the. I did that in a series that was all about different crazy things that had happened to me at conventions, like all kind of mashed together. That was the only one I basically didn't exaggerate on.
Yeah, I mean, you posted that comic strip, and I went, "Oh, you left a lot of stuff out."
I mean, I only had a couple pages. It's
that's fair.
And it was one of those things where if I say too much, nobody's going to believe me.
Right. Like sometimes whenever I look at the comic strips that I drew for Roxy, because Roxy was the series of comic strips that we had as little short episodes in between segments of validation. Like we would have a season of validation, and then as like a little space between like season 1, season 2, or season 2, season 3, we would have Roxy comics. And a lot of the stuff, particularly in the first 5 Roxy comics that I ever did, there were some comments back when Validation was updating on its own website online. People were leaving comments like, "This didn't happen in a comic shop. This is too absurd." And I'm like, this was my first ever experience in a comic shop. I kid you not. Like, yeah.
No, like, it's classic truth is stranger than fiction. Like,
absolutely.
I remember one of my classmates at the Center for Cartoon Studies, Kane Lynch, did a story that was autobio about like this crazy thing that had happened in his life. I don't know if I want to go into too much detail about it, but the main thing that was crazy is so much stuff in it was really weird. And I talked to him, I'm like, I'm thrown because it's so strange, but I know you, so I know it's true. Like, and one of the things I asked about a couple details that seemed off, he's like, we recorded the whole thing. We actually have it on video. So that's what I was referencing. I did it exactly like it actually happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it just like sometimes that's the way it is with it's one of the, I was actually talking about this in another interview. Memoir and autobio and stuff like that. I have a natural aversion to it in most things except comics. I feel like comics are the only media where that works.
I could see that because memoir in a way is pretty non-linear. This is actually tying into a project that I've started working on recently. This project, which right now has the working title of Queer Storytelling, I'm doing a lot of research on, and by research, I mean I'm reading a lot of queer fiction. So like lots of it, comics, memoirs, all of it, reading all of as much as I can get my hands on. Because I have this theory that most storytelling for like the LGBTQ community, I have this running theory that a lot of it is non-linear. It pops up a lot in terms of formatting. Like if you read Alison Bechdel's Fun Home, a lot of that is non-linear. It's jumping around from memory to memory. Some of it is linear, some of it is not. There are other examples, but like I have, to give you an idea of how extensive the research has gotten, I have a spreadsheet that's tracking all of the books that I've been keeping track of for this project. And I know for a fact I have not gotten as many as I could grab because in the research that I've been doing, I noticed that there were a lot of books pre-1950 that also need to be incorporated into this research project. But the shocking and not so shocking thing is a lot of those books that were published pre-1950 were banned in the United States and the United Kingdom because of those queer themes. Like, I am shocked that I found a copy of Memoirs of Hadrian in my uncle's like book collection, my late uncle's book collection, and it was a copy from like 1953 printed in the UK. And I'm like, how did you get your hands on this? This particular print run was famously burned. Like, how? My uncle was a kooky dude.
Well, hey, I mean, having a book that was supposed to get burned, that's a good thing in my book.
Book. Sorry.
Yeah. Also, it's killing me not making a joke about LGBTQ writers not being able to write straight.
This
That's
is why I
one.
have the running theory.
That's the one I'm allowed as an ally. Anyway.
Oh, I'll tell you a joke as an ally.
Mhm.
Or like that you can use as an ally, but I as a trans person find this really funny. The joke goes, I saw this on Tumblr, but the joke goes, listen, I don't understand. As a car mechanic, I don't understand the gay agenda, but I do understand the transmission.
I don't know why, but I really like wholesome jokes like that. That like
Yes.
I look at it and worry that I'll get in trouble if I use, but also like there's nothing actually offensive in there.
Yeah, no,
Like the
no,
one,
it's
like the one about the non-binary prospector. There's gold in them hills. I love that joke.
Hi, I am a candy bar. My pronouns are her, she.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, stuff like that. Love that kind of stuff.
And it, like every time I look at that and laugh, I feel a little guilt. I do the look around guilty thing of the. Now I can laugh. I'm alone in my house. Who knows?
Well, the internet knows now.
The internet knows now. But yeah.
It's one of the curses of publishing anything on the internet is now there's like a record of it, unless it becomes lost media.
This is true. Well, hopefully the archives manage to stay in place.
Well, we'll see. I mean, part of the reason that I'm even posting validation again on Webtoon is because the original website got taken down. So yeah, and this also happened to another short webcomic that I did, Seeing Him, which I co-created with my younger sibling. The series was published under their old name. So in reprints, I'm going to be, or if I ever get the series to print, it's going to be published with their, their writer's handle.
Right.
Yeah. So, but anyway, Seeing Him was originally published on a website called Pink Dollar Comics. Don't look it up. It doesn't exist anymore. When that website got taken down, I then posted it to Smack Jeeves, and then famously Smack Jeeves got taken down. So I put it together into a PDF and I have it up in my Ko-fi shop now.
When I was watching, I watched last night's interview, which was handled by another member of the executive board, Ethan, with Danielle Dean, and they were talking about Smash Jeeves. I somehow never heard of this.
I'm kind of surprised because in the online comic sphere, Smack Jeeves was a really viable publishing outlet. They were the Webtoons before Webtoons was Webtoons.
Do you know roughly when? I can look it up.
They were definitely around when Validation came out in 2013, and then they shuttered their doors in, I want to say 2019, 2020, something like that. I don't remember the exact date of when they shuttered their doors, but they were around for a while.
Yeah, then it's very strange I never heard of them. Like that really confuses me. But hey, it's an old story at this point of these things shutting down, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's why I run my own website whenever it comes to dedicated webcomics. Like The Legend of Jamie Roberts has its own website. Validation had its own website. We may see about getting that website back up at a later date, but right now we're just posting it on Webtoon, which is fine. Charlie and Clow and its sequels, The Case of the Wendigo and Vanita and the Demon King, are on their own website, charlieandcloud.com, which Vanita and the Demon King is another webcomic that I'm working on right now. So count that on top of reposting Validation and making new pages of The Legend of Jamie Roberts, because I just don't know how to stop making comics.
Do you ever feel like you don't have enough projects?
Funny enough, as I was working on the script for another comic project, I was like, do I have too many projects? And then I was like, nah,
Hey, if you can do it, and you are genuinely a hard worker, like
Thank
it's
you.
one of the things I always notice, because like hard work does not come naturally to me. Uh, it is something
Yeah.
I've been trying to learn ever since college, which I should have learned it before then.
I mean, I think I can chalk it up to like general upbringing as well.
Mhm.
Like, my grandmother Grammy was very industrious. My mom was very industrious. Like, mom ran her own small business
Mhm.
basically by herself for like the first 12 years of my life. Like, yeah, my father kind of helped, but not not to the extent that it was like his business that I would feel comfortable saying that. It was my mom's business. Like, she did everything. She definitely ran the books. She was always really good at accounting. This is why she works at a bank now. But
Mm.
um she's also like the first go-to person that I turn to when I need like small business advice, or when I need to look at my numbers for something and I'm like, help me figure this out. She's really good for that sort of a thing. So I have that resource that helps. But that kind of like work ethic was
Mhm.
really instilled in me when I was younger. So I don't really, part of the challenge of getting older for me has been learning to take breaks.
Mm.
Because like I don't mind working, and I have to deliberately have alarms on my phone to tell me to go to bed. It's to that point. I'm getting better at it. Like, I'm getting better at being able to pace myself, especially since now I have a daytime office job that, granted, early hours, like 7 to 3:30
Mhm.
weekdays. But I can sneakily work on some like comic scripts and things while nobody is looking. And also, I have like so many non-drawing related things related to my business that I can work on at the office while no one is looking.
I know.
So I'm actually able to like get ahead on a bunch of stuff. Like, I have the next two Kickstarters written up, outlined, rewards figured out, budget figured out, all of that stuff, because the office job is just that boring most days.
Yeah. No, I absolutely get that. Back when I worked in customer service phones,
Mm-hmm.
I got a lot of drawing done then.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
like one of
Oh
the
yeah.
things that was funny about that, I remember I was working on a character design for
Mm-hmm.
a female character,
Yeah.
and this was back before I did more free drawing as my style. So I
Mm-hmm.
was, for anyone who doesn't know, a lot of times, especially when you're trying to get a specific pose or early on before you learn how to fudge a lot of stuff,
Yeah.
you start by drawing almost like a basic wireframe skeleton. Then you draw like the muscles and skin on top, and then you draw the clothing, and it's in layers. And I had a
Mm.
supervisor walk by before I'd done the clothing and
Oh
I was like drawing porn. I
yeah.
was like, no, no, it happens in layers. Like
Yeah,
I'm
it happens
this
in
first full on
layers.
clothing. I'm not even doing heavy detail. I'm just like, this part is here and I need to know that.
Yeah. Now imagine that, but the artist who sees that, or the person who sees that is the artist for No Need for Bushido, and the character that they see you drawing is one of the characters that they have in the comic.
That is pretty awesome. I used to read No Need for Bushido.
That happened to me.
That's incredible.
Yep. Yep, that happened to me. We had the writer and the artist for that series come up and do a speaking engagement
Mhm,
for the comics and cartooning club that I was part of on campus back when I was in college.
mhm,
This was back in 2008, 2009, because it was my
mhm.
first year that I was there. And that incident happened. It was a little awkward, but
Man,
yeah.
that is so cool. Like, to me, because I went to college, like I graduated in 2008,
Yeah.
and uh, web comics were still really this kind of Wild West. Like, you didn't, there was almost a noble illegitimacy to a lot of it.
Yeah.
Like people could make any type of comic, you know, any type of art, any type of storytelling, still make money off of it because Project Wonderful existed and Project Wonderful was wonderful.
Yeah.
But
there is an alternative to Project Wonderful now. I have to look up the name of it again, but
send that to me because I miss Project Wonderful.
Right? Yeah, it's the same sort of premise as Project Wonderful. I'll find the name and I will share that with you when I can.
Absolutely. But one of the things I remember always being amazed by is when webcomic people would get real comic gigs, like with Marvel or DC. Like I remember the writer behind Dr. McNinja, which was a great comic, did a few issues of Deadpool, and I was like, that can happen? And it was so the idea of having in 2008 having a webcomic artist that wasn't like the Penny Arcade guys, maybe, but come and do a talk at a college, that's so cool.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. Yeah. Also, I just looked at my Scratchpad Google Doc that I have. The alternative to Project Wonderful is called Comic Ad. You can find it at comicad.net. There you go. First noticed them when I was looking at the webcomic Autumn Wing, because Autumn Wing has a couple of ads and banners from comicad.net, and I'm like, I didn't know that this was a thing.
So I am absolutely going to take advantage of that. By the way, for anyone who doesn't know, because this is a piece of history that I feel like comic people should hear. So let's get this in the, for anyone who happens to watch this video from C3 who has not in fact heard of this.
Yeah.
Project Wonderful was around for like some really, really good years in the heyday of when webcomics were first really becoming big. And what it was an advertising service.
Yes, but it was an advertising service that was run differently from other advertising services because it primarily serviced webcomic makers. And the way that you got ad space was you placed a bid to put your banner on a specific website to run at specific time slots. And when you place that bid, then that ad would run in that spot, in that time slot, unless somebody outbid you.
And it also had factors to it, like you could very easily get ad space for pennies. It was very little money. And you could sell ad space on your site, and based on traffic, it would be worth certain amounts. And it was very, very, very indie friendly. It was not greedy at all.
No, I hardly remember Project Wonderful taking any kind of a cut. Not unless
they definitely took some kind of a cut, but it wasn't anything crazy.
It was when you withdrew from the pot, because you could withdraw from the pot of money that you were making off of Project Wonderful. If you made withdrawals, that's when they took a cut, but the cut was not that big.
The main thing that was cool about it, besides the whole setup for how you got money, was the fact that it had, like, it was mostly webcomics. You could also control some of the content that you had. Like, I actually had problems when I didn't have my settings quite right, and I kept getting specifically adult webcomics, which I didn't want on my site. So I had to fiddle with that, but they had ways of doing it. But the main thing that was cool, I found out about Project Wonderful originally because I'd go to webcomics. They'd have an ad for another webcomic that looked like something I might want to click. That's how I discovered most of my webcomics back in the day.
Yep.
Like, I ended up with the way I used to do it is I had like a folder of bookmarks for all of my webcomics based on when they updated. Yeah. And I would basically click open all and run through all the tabs and like check 100 webcomics a day doing that.
Oh, that's a lot even for me. Like, there's a reason why Webtoons is structured the way that it is. And it's to make bookmarking webcomics so much easier, at least if you're on Webtoon.
Yeah. Like, so tell me what it's like having validation on Webtoon, because it wasn't originally designed for it.
Yeah, no, validation was not designed for Webtoon because Webtoon is a vertical scroll, and validation was published like a 3-panel comic like Garfield, where it was horizontal. Thankfully, really easy to modify that particular comic strip because all the squares are pretty much the same size. All you got to do is just shift them. Yeah. So originally, fun fact, originally Sunday comic strips were, when they printed them into books, they would do that. They would turn the comic from a horizontal format to a vertical format.
Yeah.
Garfield was the one of the first book series that did not do that when they went from newspaper to collected versions. Probably ostensibly to keep that format, but also I imagine Calvin and Hobbes also had a hand in influencing the formatting going from newspaper to collected versions,
Yeah.
because
Bill
so
Watterson in
many,
play.
so many comics from Calvin and Hobbes are just break panel sequencing that's traditionally associated with Sunday comic strips.
Yeah, which is, I mean, it was a great thing at the time because like Bill Watterson was actively rebelling against how he was being required to format stuff. Like you still see this, like if you still look at Sunday newspapers and things like that, but the comics are designed so depending on how much space is bought, you can drop the first two panels and you can restructure everything in several different ways. And Bill Watterson, once Calvin and Hobbes started getting particularly big, was like, I don't want to do that. I want to experiment. And so he ended up doing like these single panel, like full third of a page comics. And his response was, if newspapers want, they can just not run Calvin and Hobbes on Sunday. And he was big enough that he got away with that.
Bless him for it.
I remember when that was coming out because Calvin and Hobbes was huge in my childhood. But I remember when that was coming out, it got really confusing for a while because they kept changing how the Sunday paper was laid out because they had to rearrange it for Calvin and Hobbes to fit.
So when did Calvin and Hobbes stop printing in newspapers? Do you recall?
1980. It started in 1985, ended in 1995.
Okay, then that would be outside of like, because I didn't really start reading like Sunday comics until like 96 or something like that.
Yeah, it was one of the most formative moments for me as a creator was the ending of Calvin and Hobbes, because that was the first time I really understood that a story could end. Like I was 10 years old, I heard it was ending, and I'm like, no, you can't do that. I love this comic. But like I was also right. I remember somewhere around that time, I don't know if it was 5 years after or anything like that, Seinfeld kind of did the exact same thing where you had, which was a show my parents mostly watched and I was in the room for, but it was always,
I think that's true for most kids who watch Seinfeld.
But I remember like, it was interesting to me with both that the whole point was they wanted to end on a high note. Well, still good.
Yeah.
And then when I started getting older, and especially when I started watching things like anime, which anime series tend to be really short compared to a lot of other things.
Depending. Looking at One Piece as a not short series.
There are exceptions, but like when I really started getting into anime in college, I was Trigun, Cowboy Bebop, Big O. Like these are shows that were planned to be 26 episodes and done. And that was intentional. And sometimes you got things like Fooly Cooly. That was 6 episodes and done. And
I thought it was 4, but 6 makes sense.
It was. It's 6, and I think there might have been a 7th episode that didn't officially air. I really liked Fooly Cooly. Highly recommend it if you haven't seen it. It's weird.
It is very weird. I loved the soundtrack.
Oh yeah,
soundtrack is great.
But the main point is that like all of these were designed to be a specific length, and I realized they're telling more interesting stories. And there are actual consequences that happen. Like they're not like Trigun to me was a big example because characters died, like main characters. And it was just, I don't know, like that definitely changed how I started to look at storytelling as a whole.
I mean, that was a good chunk of why I kept a lot of my comic series is short. Part of it was I wanted to tell a story from start to finish and prove that I could do it. The other part of it was I wanted those stories to have a natural ending. The only reason that I even am making Vanita and the Demon King was because when I was working on the script for it, partway through the scripting, the characters from the Case of the Wendigo popped up and I went, oh, they just naturally brought themselves into the story. Okay, I guess we're running with this. Yeah.
That's
It,
always fun.
I mean, it's always fun. It's just interesting to me because the Charlie and Clow adventures are the only like kind of series that I have, and even then it's a really loose continuity. Most of my stuff you can read as standalone. Like there's
Yeah.
I mean, The Legend of Jamie Roberts is the first long running series that I have since Validation. But even then, Validation was written by CB. Like, my hand in it was I helped pitch certain story ideas, like Mike and Steve being himbos. That was me. That was me. You're welcome. The internet needs more himbos. And
That's a sticker you need to make.
yeah, yeah. I brought the himbos. You're welcome. I mean,
internet
it
needs
could
more
also
himbos.
the world needs more himbos. Yes. Honestly, that could fit for The Legend of Jamie Roberts too, because there are some delightful himbos in that one.
But
Anyway, yeah.
I've often approached writing the same way. I do have a running graphic novel series that does take place in the same universe.
Mm-hmm.
I really need to finish that third book, but I did make an effort, even though there's a lot of callback stuff in the second book. Like each one is a story in its own right, and there's a lot of character switching. One of the things that I want to be consistent with in pretty much every one of the books for the series is that the protagonist changes.
I think that, yeah.
Yeah, I'm kind of stealing that idea from Tana French, who, if you like good writing and depressing writing, then she makes some really good mysteries.
I'm actually going to write that down. Not that I need to borrow any more books because I have a whole bunch that I just got from the library for the last couple of days.
Yeah.
Again, research projects.
I hear you.
Tana French?
Tana French, T-A-N-A. It's the series is called The Dublin Murder Squad. And first book in it is called In the Woods. I always have to think about it because I get it mixed up with Into the Woods. But
the best musical, but you got to watch the Broadway version. The movie version does a lot of things that I don't agree with.
Yeah, but with the thing that's cool about Tana French, the main character of her next book is a side character in the previous book.
Becky Chambers did the same thing in the Wayfair series. Highly recommend the Wayfair series. It starts with the long way to a small angry planet. And then the kind of loose sequel, Closed and Common Orbit, follows a character who was introduced but not introduced at the end of the first book. And then the third book actually shifts to the like origin home spaceship of the main character from the first book. And then the fourth book follows first book's main character's love interest. It's a whole universe. It's amazing.
That does sound good. Like one of the things that is part of why I like that idea of having the next story follow someone that you introduced as a bit character in the previous thing. I have a writing philosophy that I partially adapted from anime and video games, like around the end of college. And that is write your main characters as if they're side characters.
You know, it's funny that you mentioned that because The Legend of Jamie Roberts happened because the original story was going to follow a different character and Jamie was a side character in that narrative. But the more that I worked on it, the more that I was like, I would rather tell Jamie's story.
Yeah. Is it the captain?
No, it was a different character entirely who got written out of the story completely. So, because they were just that boring.
But it is kind of funny how like the side characters just tend to be written more interesting, at least from my perspective. You don't make them so that they're going to automatically appeal to everybody. And that gives you some freedom.
Yeah, it's nice. Also, there's this kind of like implicit idea that this is something that my siblings and I came up with. And whenever I throw this out to other authors, they're confused at first. But then when I explain the concept, they're like, oh, that makes sense. The idea that the main character is pants. in that they are a pair of pants that you can put on and take off at will, and just live vicariously through them. Bella from Twilight is a very obviously good example of the pants character. Like,
Yeah.
you are very obviously meant to self-insert yourself into her in the narrative.
Right.
Like, that is how the book is written. A lot of YA novels are written like this, unfortunately, which is why when I do come across YA novels like Tess of the Road that have characters that are not a pair of pants, I'm like, yes, please, I will sing your praises to the hills.
Yeah. And the real problem is, a lot of times, in order to make it fit as many people as possible, it's a pair of sweatpants with an adjustable waist. Like,
it is the laziest thing.
Yeah, exactly. Like
literally, it is sweatpants. It is the laziest thing.
Yeah. I got pretty quickly where you were going with that, because this is my exact complaint. Like, one of the things that made it click for me was, I'm a big fan of the Ace Attorney games, the Phoenix Wright games.
Yeah.
And there's a lot really great in there. I've always found Phoenix a bit of a boring protagonist, or at least I did for the first trilogy. He got better in some of the later stuff.
Probably because he was allowed to be weird.
Oh yeah, they got real weird with him for a little bit, and that was nice. But the thing that really changed things for me was playing Ace Attorney Investigations, which is a lesser known game in the series, where you play as the main rival, Edgeworth.
Oh, okay.
Like, you basically are playing as a prosecutor, but instead of it being a courtroom thing, you are helping Gumshoe with the actual investigation. And it really clicked with me, because Edgeworth had been established as a side character who was a rival to the main character. And playing things from his perspective was so much more interesting to me.
Yeah.
Just because, like, it really showed how competent he was. It showed, like, he had a very different type of attitude towards things. You were still getting his inner monologue. A lot of it was very, and a lot of it was was thinking about the rivalry he kind of had with Phoenix, but how there's also, like, he really respects how he does things as a lawyer, and, like, he's trying to be more like that and more interested in justice than winning. And I'm like, that's more interesting than just being like, I'm the good guy.
Yeah. Yeah, that is way more interesting. Like, that kind of analysis. Yeah. Which doesn't happen super duper often.
But yeah, it's one of those things that yeah, I've tried to do in most of my stuff. I very often like to try to figure out, and increasingly with some of the mystery stuff I write, I try to let the story tell me who the main character is instead of me figuring it out.
So, while I'm thinking about it, I have a couple questions for you, actually. First, which came first, Cospain or Letters from the Devil?
Letters of the Devil.
Letters of the Devil. Okay.
Yeah.
So where did the idea for Letters of the Devil come from? Or what collection of ideas? I find that sometimes when I'm thinking of a story, there's a collection of ideas that come together to form the story pitch. So is that true for you? Or was there a singular idea that you were like, I have to make a commentary about it?
Oh, no, it absolutely came together from a bunch of things. First off, shortly before I went to the Center for Cartoon Studies, I started really getting into mystery comics.
Okay.
And the thing that confused me was mystery comics are not a big genre in the US.
They really aren't. No,
they really aren't. And the ones that call themselves mystery comics very often are not great. But the thing that's funny about it is, in Japan, it's a huge genre. And I mainly got into the Kindaichi case files, which, if you can track down, really good cozy mysteries, a lot of fun. I see you writing Kindaichi.
Daichi.
I will tell you, it is difficult to find them for some reason. Like, there were print runs a long time ago, and they went completely out of print. Like,
I have an idea of where I could find them, but
cool.
It's online, and it's probably through illicit means.
Fair enough. One other thing you can find, I haven't watched it yet, but they did make an anime of it.
Okay.
But that really got me interested in it, because it's like, this works great for mysteries. Like, it's incredible. And so I decided I wanted to be making mystery comics. So I was thinking about that a lot while I was at CCS. The other big influence comic-wise was discovering EC comics.
Yeah.
For those who don't know, EC went on to be the company that made Mad Magazine, but before then, they made Tales from the Crypt, shock suspense stories. Like, they specialized in these short story comics that really pushed boundaries, and like these were golden age stuff. This was before the Comics Code started censoring everything, and it dealt with racism in very serious ways. It dealt with prejudice. Like, it looked at these really deep and scary topics. And like, if they'd been allowed to continue, comics would have been a much different place.
Oh yeah.
But reading those kind of gave me an idea for doing a vignette series. And the original name was Letters from the Devil. That changed because I found out that name was taken by Anton LaVey, founder of the Church of Satan. I was like, not touching that.
We don't need to do that for a murder mystery book.
Exactly. Well, the concept I had for these, to be a bunch of short stories, and the whole idea is someone would get a letter and it would give away secrets and would ruin their life, like in different ways. And what was interesting, like the whole concept of calling it calling it Letters from the Devil, was that's the only explanation you ever got where the letters come from.
Gotcha.
And it's like, that's all the explanation you need. This is what happens as a result of them. And I was like, the writing just wasn't happening that way. But I had this idea. I was thinking maybe I'd want it to be my thesis. And in the year leading up to my final year at CCS, which is when you make your big, like whatever big project you're going to do to try to graduate. A series of things that I read and played and watched during that time kind of came together, and all of a sudden the way this needed to work clicked in my head. I read The Count of Monte Cristo.
That's a good book.
And I played the first Zero Escape game. Those are the two main things.
Okay.
Like, little things I picked up from that made me go, individual stories aren't happening. What if I kind of combine this into one story? With like, you have a full cast of characters, all of them with secrets, all of them having different stuff happening, and each of them are getting these letters that are giving away stuff. And the most important thing is the letters don't lie. And it's all about how they tell the secrets, and they ruin their own lives with them.
I like that. Yeah.
And it finally it clicked enough that I was able to write the book, and I got the prologue and first chapter done in time to graduate, with thumbnails for the entire rest of the thing to say, no, really, I have a whole book. And once I had it pretty much entirely done, I started it as a webcomic, I want to say January 2017. And to answer your follow-up question, Cost Pain started in July 2017. So
gotcha. So you were doing two webcomics at once there for a little bit.
To be fair, I'd completely drawn one of them. I just had post scheduled.
Good call. That's a good way to do it. And also to clarify, because I know I mentioned having 3 webcomics running at the same time, Validation is already finished. I'm just reformatting everything for Webtoon. And also Instagram, because it has its own Instagram account, and I've been posting comics there as well.
Free advice for anyone planning to do a webcomic: get a backlog.
Absolutely, get a backlog. That is the only reason my comics were able to keep up a regular schedule while I was moving to a new home this past month.
I these days don't operate with a big backlog, but I'm running. That's for one webcomic, one thing posting a week. I keep thinking about doing more Cost Pain a week, and the reason I don't is because I'm terrified of running out of ideas.
I mean, when it comes to a weekly gag comic, I get that, because Johnson and Sir was that for me. It was, I mean, it wasn't formatted like a Sunday weekly gag comic. It was formatted like a manga page, but it was a gag a day once a week. It was that comic.
It's funny because I've always been able to write pretty fast in general. And one of the things I discovered I really like doing when I was in grad school was making horror comics, which I still find a lot of fun. I actually haven't done it in a while, but horror comics are great because you don't have to think about them. Like, you really want it to hit a gut level when you're working on it.
Oh yeah. And the thing with horror comics is if you're overthinking it, you're missing it.
And it's funny because I wanted to do mystery, and mystery is the exact opposite. You have to do a lot of thinking in mystery.
Yeah, which is the
Yeah.
problem I'm having with this script that I've been working on. Because this script, the first draft of it, I
Mhm.
approached it like kind of like a action three-pronged narrative, kind of like Cairo by G.
Mhm.
Willow Wilson, and I want to say the artist was M.K. Perker because G. Willow Wilson is a writer. Love Cairo, by the way. That book was one of the things that made me go, okay, maybe I could do graphic novels.
Hmm.
Highly recommend you give it a read. It's great. But
I'll need to check that out. G. Willow Wilson, creator of the current version of Ms. Marvel, right? The
yes,
Kamala
very
Khan.
same.
Yeah.
Which was why I even picked up Miss Marvel, was because I saw G. Willow Wilson was a writer, and I'm like, I really liked Cairo. This better be good.
But yeah, like mystery, very complicated. You have to think of a lot of moving parts. You have to do all that stuff. And so I was always like, oh man, mystery writing for comics is really difficult. I'm starting to understand why not as many people do it as I thought. But I've come to learn one big thing. Mystery is not the scariest thing to write. The scariest thing to write is comedy.
Yeah.
I have done, like, this comic is going to be 6 years old this year. I have not Cost Pain. I have not missed a week in that time. I am still terrified every week. It's so scary.
But that's how you know that you got to do it.
Yeah.
It's funny because I was just watching an episode before we started recording. I was watching an episode of Cinema Therapy, where a therapist and a film director sit together and they watch a movie and they comment on it. And it's usually the therapist being like, well, I'm noticing this thing and this thing and this thing. And they just did an episode about self-actualization and the Princess Diaries. So like part of self-actualizing is like, it's more than just facing your fear. It's also acknowledging that the fear has an effect on you and doing it anyway. And the book that the therapist mentioned in the episode was Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway, which I have not read yet. But the fact that he's dropped the title of that book like twice in this YouTube series makes me go, I might want to check that out.
Yeah. It's funny because that very much aligns with something that I've thought about before. It's just the fact, like, so this actually came up recently because I was talking to somebody about Green Lantern, the DC character. And I was recommending to them because they were curious about how some of that stuff worked, because it's one of the weirder parts of the DC universe. But I recommended the Green Lantern animated show, which is actually very good. Highly recommended anyone who check it out. I said it's great, even though they follow the most boring Green Lantern shots fired. And the reason I said that, I was talking about Hal Jordan, and the thing that's boring to me about Hal Jordan is he's supposed to be the man without fear. He is not afraid of anything, and that's why he's got the power of determination. And I'm like, that's not how you get the power of determination.
Well, that's also why he's so boring.
Yeah, exactly. It's not courage to be not afraid of anything.
Yeah.
Courage is being afraid and doing the right thing anyway.
Yeah. Maybe not even the right thing, but feeling the fear and doing it anyway.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of what creativity is too, because like you mentioned that I have a lot of projects happening at the same time. This is something that Jade also mentioned when I had a chat with her, when we were talking about transitioning away from Patreon and why we both did it. And, you know, she brought up Kelci works on a lot of comics, and there's a part of it is I am constantly afraid that my life is going to get cut short. So all of these ideas that I have like up here and in here have to come out.
Yeah.
Because if they don't, it's not only inspiration squandered, it is me not getting out there before I was done.
In a very real way, the universes you create are real to you, and if you don't get them down, they die with you.
Exactly.
I get that 100%.
Yeah, and that's why I keep like outlines for everything, records for everything. This is why I work on as much stuff as I do, is especially because I'm gonna get real for a second here. Mental illness runs in my family, and there have been members of my family who have either committed suicide or have threatened to commit suicide.
Mm.
I do not feel that fear now. However, when I was at my lowest, I was like 14 and giving serious thought to that. And then I had a dream about death, and that scared me. And that made me go, I can't go yet. I have to keep going.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was another scare that I had when I was like in my 20s.
Mm-hmm.
But I had family beside me who was able to walk me through it. And thankfully, the family that I had who helped me through it also had gone through a scare of their own a couple of years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And we were able to talk through it and work it out. And I'm so glad that I did that, because if I had not done that, I would not be here making the comics and talking about the comics that I do.
Absolutely. Yeah, like it's one of the things that is in some ways most concerning with a lot of the cartoonists I talk to. Mm-hmm. Is it's so like self-care is so incredibly important. And for a lot of people with sort of the personality type that seems to attract cartoonists, they're not good at seeking it.
Yeah, remember when I mentioned that I'm trying to get better about like self-care and taking breaks? That's a chunk of it.
This guy too. Like, here's the thing. I had about a 6-month stretch in the last year where I thought I was dealing with serious burnout. Like my entire brain was like, it was a slog to do anything. Mm-hmm. And I kind of figured out that the main problem was I was not getting out of the house. I was like, I'd gone into full clam up mode.
Yeah.
This is combined with, pretty sure I have undiagnosed SAD, because I always have something along these lines happen towards the end of the year.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I literally like went for a walk and did some weight work, and I instantly felt better. And I'm like, oh, I'm not dealing with burnout.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. I'm dealing with something very different.
Yeah. This is why I advocate for like biking to more places more often, is because I know I feel better when I ride my bike to places, because it doesn't just get me out, it gets me to exercise, which is what I need. As annoying as it is to exercise, you just got to find the exercise that resonates with you the most. Like, do not make me do jumping jacks. Why would I ever do jumping jacks? What is the practical purpose of jumping jacks? I don't understand. But if you put me like in a Planet Fitness and ask me to lift weights, I know how to do that, because that was my jam when I was in high school. I was actually like working my way up to not necessarily be like a pro weightlifter, but like definitely better than I was before. My max back in high school was like I could bench like 210, which can't do that anymore. But exercise is still good. Yeah.
I always have.
How do you think I got these guns?
I'm sorry. Did you bring tickets to the gun show?
Tickets to the gun show? Yeah. They've definitely been thicker, but still nice.
I was one of the lucky ones who lost the COVID-19 when all that was happening. Because one of the things I've discovered is when my life feels like it's spiraling out of control, that's when I can get a workout routine going. Like something
you
about
need to, because working out boosts your endorphins. It makes you feel better.
It really does. I actually need to get back into it, because I kind of stopped for 2 reasons. One, I just came back from a family reunion, so I was gone for a week and a half. I couldn't really bring my weights with me. Yeah. And the other thing was I'd been working on making the special editions for What the Gnomes Know, which I was doing at a standing desk for about a week for about 10 hours a day. Oof. So my back kind of was not happy with me for a couple weeks.
Yeah, as nice as it is to have a standing desk, especially since I do have a day job that is office based, so I'm sitting down most of the time. It's still like I would still rather be riding my bike to places, because that makes me exercise my legs. And hilariously, humans were not built to stand still. Like physiologically, we were not built to stand still. The way that our veins contract in our legs require us to move them. Yeah. Because if they do not move, then the blood is not pumped in the best way.
Yeah. I'm a lifelong pacer, so I absolutely get that.
Yeah. Yeah. So like, yeah, it's just a matter of like finding the exercise that resonates with you. And like, I'm just going to recommend a series that actually got me into thinking about the exercise that would resonate with me.
Mhm.
John Green and a friend of his did a short YouTube series. I can't remember what the name of it is. It's something like the 90-day challenge or something like that, where like every day for 90 days, they tried a different form of exercise, and they tried things like boxing, jogging, walking in the park. I think at one point they tried CrossFit. Maybe don't do CrossFit. CrossFit's really hard on your body and makes you kind of an obnoxious gym bro.
Yeah. I mean, anything that works for people, it works for people. But
I mean, if it does, no judgment. But at the same time, oh my good God, it wrecks your back.
Yeah. I don't think I used to be a runner. Not a very good one, but that's what I would do.
You don't have to be good to do it.
Yeah. The main problem I have is that running is honestly kind of hard on your back.
Okay, I can see that. Yeah.
Like walking is honestly a better exercise if you have back issues like I do.
Mm-hmm.
I wish I could do running more. I kind of should work up to it, but
some good exercises to recommend, because for a while I did yoga daily. And there were some really good yoga poses that really helped with like lower back strength.
Yep.
There's I mean, cat pose and cow pose, obviously, like that's when you arch your back and lower your back. But there is also downward dog, which is like you sit on your heels, you spread your knees apart, and then you like stretch your arms out and then rest your chin on the floor. And that really stretches out your lumbar.
Yeah. I'm always a little careful with this. I did try during the pandemic, Down Dog, I think is the name of the app. And
some of those poses.
Well, the main thing I realized from it is with my back issues, I probably need to talk to a professional if I'm going to do that. I've also always been a little paranoid about doing yoga because it feels like I've had multiple people from India tell me that I'm crazy about this. It feels like cultural appropriation.
Oh, okay.
You know what I mean? Like it is literally a religious practice in Hinduism.
On the one hand, I understand it. On the other hand, it's a little bit like saying, I'm not a Catholic, so I can't pray.
Okay, that's an interesting example for it. I was kind of likening it in my head to the equivalent of doing an arm stretch by crossing yourself over and over again. But your example kind of also makes more sense.
I'm just picturing a hardcore workout that's just nothing but this, like 50 repetitions.
No, here's the thing. Like I remember like in Scouts, one of the punishments they'd have for us if we were all acting up is we had to keep the salute at a right angle, and we just had to hold it till they said stop.
Oh, jeez. Oof.
And I know I've had a few people who were students of Catholic schools growing up, in the really, really serious Catholic schools, who one of the punishments they used to have to do, hands out like the cross with a stack of Bibles.
Yeah. Fun bit that I learned from doing the queer storytelling research project. So Boy Scouts was kind of founded back in like the 1910s-ish to try to combat homophobia, or no, not homophobia, but like trying to combat just the presence of homosexuality. The whole idea of like, no, we need to have good, clean living and good, clean standards. There was also like way back in like 1910s, social purity was really getting into its heyday.
Although I find that the idea of we must combat homosexuality, no girls allowed. And it's like, wait, what? Hold on.
Yeah, no, it's self-defeating. And there are a lot of people in the gay community and outside of it who point that out. And there is a reason why when the YMCA was first founded and they were like, No women allowed. This is entirely a boys only club. There was a reason why there were a lot of gay men who were like, okay, so we're meeting at the YMCA, right? Because they
Yeah.
have beds that they can just rent to us and we can just rent a room and they won't ask any questions. There's a reason why the Village People did a song about it. Yeah.
No,
the things you find out when you do research into queer history.
Yeah, no, I believe it. I'm trying to. It's. We were talking about this in a previous stream too, like how different groups have different types of signaling for this type of stuff.
Oh yeah,
and how that tends to evolve over the years. Like my parents would often talk about how if a man had his ears pierced, like which ear he had pierced was a signal of his orientation.
Yeah.
Which, as far as I can tell, not that much of a thing anymore.
No, not that much of a thing. And also back in the 80s, a fun fact for people who watch Stranger Things, the color of the handkerchief that you keep in your back pocket and which pocket that you keep it in also signaled like what sexual acts that you did and whether you were a top or a bottom.
How did people learn this stuff before the internet? That's what I want to know.
Word of mouth. There were also a lousy amount of gay bars. Gay bars became less of a thing after the internet proliferated. Because like there's actually a new book. I haven't read it yet, but there's a lesbian who goes scouting across the nation to the few lesbian bars that are left. Like way back when there used to be like over 260 plus. Now there are like 20 nationwide.
Yeah.
But
it's almost a niche that seems like it doesn't need filling in the same way.
It's
at least not to the same degree. It's still, there should be, I feel like these bars should still exist, but
I mean, like, as far as being like a lesbian bar, I mean, like a general like gay bar.
Yeah.
Great, needs to exist. There's one in Toledo, glad it exists. At least one that I can think of. There's probably more, but I know of one that's in downtown. Glad that it exists. But going to those places was how you found out about these kinds of codes and found out about these kinds of like signals.
Yeah.
Or you just hung out in Greenwich Village in New York. Like that too. Or in or you hung out in LA. I'm trying to remember the particular neighborhoods at San Francisco in particular.
San Francisco, it's Castro, right?
I want to say it's actually Sirloin. There was a neighborhood like called Sirloin. I'm pretty sure. I have to look at my notes again. Yeah. I have so many notes. Oh my God. Hold on. I have to show this off. Like I have an entire binder of notes for this research project. There's just so much. And I have one section that's just research notes for the nonfiction titles that I've been looking at. There's an entire tab just for books to check out. Like I have so many things. Like it's I really like doing research. I don't mind doing this kind of a thing, but it is a lot.
Yeah. It's funny because like one of the other things that related to this I came across recently is that a lot of the different terminology and coding and signaling, a big part is that these things developed completely independently across like underground and separate circles of the community. The example that came up, I was talking to one of my friends in the LGBTQ community because you need safe people to ask this stuff to.
Oh yeah.
And I asked about like because I wasn't entirely clear on the difference between bi and pan, and their answer was there isn't really one. They mean the same thing, but they were developed in like East Coast and West Coast or something like that.
Yeah, they were developed into separate like. I don't want to say separate, but like they were developed in separate communities, but they are basically the same thing. Shots fired, by the way. Well, speaking as somebody who identifies as bisexual.
Yeah. And like the whole thing was like, yeah, just whichever you prefer to say or things like that. But
yeah,
it was.
Yeah. It was and that's not even That's not even getting into like the history behind some of the like activist communities that sprung up after Stonewall, because there were a lot of activist communities after Stonewall that like when they described themselves as bisexual, when using a lot of the qualifiers for what they mean by bisexual, some people would look at that list and be like, that's pansexual. Why are they calling it bi? And the reason is it was that community that came up with what bisexual meant. So that's what it means to them.
Yeah. Actually, this also reminds me on the family reunion I was just at, this was in Cape Cod, Massachusetts.
Okay.
And we took a day trip up to Provincetown.
Okay.
Which I'm curious if you've heard of, because I hadn't.
I feel like I came across it when I was doing research on Native American history, because when you're doing research on queer history, Native American history inevitably pops up. And we can get into that later, but anyway, so Provincetown, tell me about Provincetown.
Well, so we go up there. I had a great time. One of the things I thought was kind of cool is I was looking around, like there were pride flags everywhere. And I was like, okay, cool. Like they're getting ready for a couple weeks. That's nice. And I got back. I hadn't gone out there with my parents. I'd gone out with some of my cousins, and my parents were like, oh, you got to go to Provincetown. That's so cool. That was like a huge gay haven back in the day. I was like,
yep.
And I was like, oh, I was like, did you know that? I was like, no, but that tracks with everything I saw.
That explains all the flags.
That explains a lot. We ended up going again because my parents wanted to see Provincetown. Awesome little town at the very, very point of Cape Cod. But yeah, it just was kind of funny because I'd never heard of this place. But as soon as I got there, I'm like, hey, there are a lot of flags. That's really cool. Also, I did take a photo while I was there. Just because it made me happy, and I had to send it to my D&D group, of whom I'm like the token, like straight cis everything.
Oh, so you are the straight that's on thin ice.
Yes, exactly. That was my name in that server for a while. Token straight on thin ice was my name on that server for
perfect.
But there was literally a shirt that says, "These gays, they're trying to murder me," and I sent this to them saying, every time I DM. Let's see. I don't know if it's not showing up. But yeah,
that's amazing. I want that shirt.
Yeah,
I want that shirt because that, as the DM for my own group of also very queer people, that tracks.
Yeah. Oh, speaking, transitioning a little bit to D&D.
Sure.
Kind of cool bit of news for me is so I've been running a campaign a long time ago called Legacy of the Saints.
Okay.
That I put on hold in about 2019 because I needed to finish the second Letters of the Devil book, and it just was taking up too much of my time. We ended on a really nasty cliffhanger. After which, my friend Ariane ran their campaign, and that lasted for 4.5 years. We went level 1 to level 20, and actually finished a campaign. Huge deal in D&D.
Yes, it is a very huge deal, especially if you finished at level 20. Good job. Good job.
And this past weekend, we started Legacy of the Saints again.
Heck yeah! That's awesome.
Like 3.5 years, we started right back at that cliffhanger.
Heck yes. Glad that you could address that.
What was really funny about it was like me going through all these notes. Like I have 4.5 more years of just D&D playing. I did so much dumb crap as a DM. I set up that, like, the situation they were in, I set up so badly. Like, there was something like 7 enemies and all of them at different stats.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, on the one hand, I get it, because when I first started DMing, I used to do that to myself a lot too. On the other hand, it's like, now that I have a little bit more experience, that's like, oh, this hurts. Yeah.
Oh, I'll tell you one thing that was fun that I got to do.
Okay.
So the fight actually ended up going really well.
Good.
I ended up, they're in a place that was magically unstable, so I decided to let something random and magical happen to kind of help them out. Like it was the end of the day, so they'd been down a lot of stuff and they'd been ambushed. So the fight was kind of built for that. But it's like, okay, we're coming back to this after years. and we're introducing another party member because one of our friends joined the group after all this.
Oh, okay.
And so I'm like, they magically appear, you all get healed, and you're a level higher. So they had a chance to like level up their character and figure everything out. So I did make the fight a little bit more difficult, but that's a big change.
It is, yeah.
And there was actually a really fun moment where one of the enemies just got wrecked and had 4 hit points left and had 32 points of damage done to them.
Oh my gosh.
So I said, like, normally I do the thing where if they get knocked unconscious, they're unconscious and they are bleeding out. Enemies don't actually just insta die. But in this case, and I just reached up and I ripped the sheet I had for him. So I gave them a character sheet rip.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. Love that. Wow, chef's kiss.
Yeah.
Good DM moment.
Yeah, it was fun. And honestly, the fight went really well.
Good.
Here's a quick DMing question for you because I'm curious.
Okay.
When you are running multiple enemies, do you do it digitally or do you have sheets?
I usually have sheets. I'm really analog when it comes to running D&D.
Yeah.
That's just my preference. I also don't carry a tablet everywhere. I mean, as far as like apps on my phone, I used to have apps on my phone. Now I don't remember what those apps are anymore.
Yeah.
And I'm not shelling money for D&D Beyond. Sorry.
Yeah.
Glad that happy for people who are sponsored by D&D Beyond. I'd rather not. But when it comes to DMing, I started out analog and I just keep to analog. It's easier for my dumb research brain to rifle through paper notes because I will say this, having been bullet journaling for the last 3 or 4 years, I've gotten really good at indexing where things are at. And being able to like look at the index and being like, okay, I need to find this particular character. Where's this character at? Page 34. Okay, flip. And having all of the pages accurately numbered and all of that really helps too. Helps with the research, helps with my DMing. Also, picked up a bunch of tips for DMing, not just from Matt Mercer doing his like GM tips short series that he did with Geek and Sundry back in the day. But I also just watched a bunch of other DMs. Like first DM that I ever saw doing a GM thing was Will Wheaton, actually. Learned a lot from him. Learned a lot from Matt Mercer. And when I started watching Brendan Lee Mulligan, learned a lot from Brendan Lee Mulligan.
Was the Wheaton thing Titan's Grave?
What was that?
Was the Wheaton thing Titan's Grave?
Yes, it was.
Cool.
Yeah, it was.
Like, what did Wheaton do?
Yeah. Titan's Grave was my first introduction to recorded Let's Plays of tabletop games, actually. It was not Critical Role. It was Titan's Grave.
I also, that was like, Critical Role also wasn't my intro. My intro, I think, was Acquisitions Incorporated.
Okay.
Like really, really old stuff where like they started with a little bit of a podcast and then they do live shows at games run by Chris Perkins, who's one of the guys who writes everything. It's possible I heard a little bit before that. There was a series by a streamer named Lord Cat that I watched a bunch of his stuff, but I don't remember if that was before or after Acquisitions Incorporated. But yeah, and then Critical Role happened and I'm like, holy crap, this looks amazing.
Well, a Critical Role was also like they were doing a lot of things that were new at the time that nobody else had done before. Because up to that point, most D&D and other Let's Play shows were edited to cut out the dead air and like the rolling for initiatives and all of that stuff. And Critical Role was one of the first shows that did not do that. They left everything unedited for the most part. Yeah,
like they were just all playing live.
And it was all live. Yeah. I mean, there's a little bit of that live magic that's not there now that they've started recording their episodes ahead of time.
Yeah.
But there is still that, like, none of this is edited, so it's there.
Yeah. I I honestly, I kind of appreciate that they recorded ahead of time. It makes their lives so much easier.
I get it. They're busy people. They're
Yeah.
voice actors, and they still have other jobs that's
Yeah.
not just playing D&D every Thursday night. Which
And that's just it. It sucks that they're working at 7:00 at night for 4 hours.
yeah, especially since here in the Eastern time zone where we're both at, like that means I now miss the live episodes. I can only
Yeah.
catch them on replays because the
I'm
office job requires me going in and clocking in at 7 a.m. every
Yeah.
weekday.
This vacation has got me behind on it. I'm going to need to catch back up.
Yeah,
But yeah,
highly recommend.
oh yeah, I caught the first episode of the new, the second half of the party. I'll put
Yeah.
it that way. And
Yeah.
the fact that they've Emily Axford, good inclusion.
Yes. Also, I started watching their Legend of Zelda one shot. Also, highly recommend that. They actually do a Powered by the Apocalypse system for
Ooh.
that Legend of Zelda one shot because I was like, how are they going to do this?
Yeah.
And then I saw them flash up like character stats, and I'm like, is this a D3 system? Because they use the little Triforce to indicate everybody's stats, which is
Well, that's kinda
cute
cool.
as hell. But also made me go, are they rolling D4s in this system? What's going on? But then they rolled the first roll and it was like 8. And I'm like, either they're rolling multiple D4s or this is not a D4 system.
I'm interested in that because like Powered by the Apocalypse, I had a bad intro to, and I really want to get over that.
So my only understanding with Powered by the Apocalypse anything is understanding that the system is what powers an RPG that I'm a part of, Urban Shadows. Or at least that's the system that we are using, which is run by Powered by the Apocalypse. This is for the podcast that I'm a part of, which hilariously, there was a part of me that wasn't intending on being a podcast co-host, but there was another part of me that was like, I really want to try podcasting again. Because I had tried podcasting a couple of times pre 2020. For a little while, my buddy Sean and I did a punk rock podcast, but we only did like one episode. And then I did a political podcast post 2016 called Extra Clothespins, because our punk show was called Clothespins and Hand Grenades. But I did a little segment called Extra Clothespins. But Extra Clothespins actually ran longer than Clothespins and Hand Grenades, which is funny to me. But in Extra Clothespins, I kept an eye on congressional news, and I would put out calls to action to be like, hey, if this is an issue that resonates with you, here's how you get in touch with your senators or your House of Representatives. Or if this is an issue that's state level, here's how you get in touch with your governor, that sort of thing. Or being like, hey, this particular issue is being tabled. It's still in discussions. Nothing's been voted on yet. But because it's still in discussion, now's your time to contact so-and-so to be like, hey, maybe just kill it in committee. So like that was something that I was really a part of post 2016. And that it was helped by the fact that I did a lot of volunteer work with my local Indivisible group. So that was how I was able to keep in touch with a lot of what was going on in politics at the time, which I'm still kind of low-key involved with politics. The unfortunate thing is whenever you are queer and in America, you get involved in politics whether you want to or not, especially lately.
Yeah.
And we're not going to get into that right now.
Yeah,
but
it sucks when your existence is a political statement.
Yeah, and it really shouldn't be. But we live in the cult of heterosexuality, which dictates that men have penises, women have vaginas, they have their specific roles, and men are attracted to women, women are attracted to men. Anybody who deviates from that is not normal. That is the cult of heterosexuality. Which is part of why I argue asexual and aromantic people also belong in the queer umbrella, because the cult of heterosexuality also dictates that people who participate in that cult be sexually driven, even if they don't openly express their sexual desires.
Right.
Like, there is still that understanding that you have to participate in the relationship escalator.
Yeah.
The idea of you go on a first date, second date, third date, you get married, you have kids, you get a house, and all of that's the relationship escalator. And that's very much in the cult of heterosexuality. And I'm not going to get into the various ways that the queer community has reacted to that or tried to assimilate themselves into that. That is a discussion for another day. This is stuff, by the way, that I didn't really realize about the gay community until I started working on validation. And it was also one of those things where when I was working on validation, I still thought of myself as cisgender and did not realize that a lot of what I was feeling as a kid and what I was feeling then was like not normal cisgender thoughts. And I was like, oh, this other word fits me better. This makes more sense to me.
Yeah.
And then after working on validation for a while and getting acquainted with other terminology, that's when I started really getting into the feel of being genderqueer and still genderqueer. But also I am feeling a lot more comfortable with just transgenderness in general.
Yeah.
This idea of, hey, I don't identify with the gender identity that the culture at large assigned to me when I was born. The entire premise that your gender is assigned to you based on what is between your legs when you are immediately out of your parents' womb is kind of a silly notion.
Yeah.
And this is, fun fact, this is how I discovered that a lot of Native American issues get tied up in a lot of LGBT issues. Because in a lot of Native American cultures, pre-contact, they didn't really assign gender roles like at birth. Like, and there's a lot of stuff that they did that was very queer, that it wasn't even that the missionaries came over and oops, smallpox, everybody's dead now. It was the missionaries came over, saw these men dressed as women. In particular, they write a lot in the old records about men dressed as women and basically killed them. There's written records of this. They either killed them, sold them into slavery, or otherwise just got rid of them.
Yeah.
Because they were like, that whole philosophy of, well, the philosophy of kill the Indian to save the man didn't really come about until the Enlightenment, which was a couple of centuries after first contact. The Spanish were nasty when they came in first contact with the Native American people. Just saying that, having done my research on Native American history and LGBT history, like, ooh, we're not going to get into that today. I might do an entire separate video about that, but
that would be a pretty awesome video, honestly.
Well, but me just talking about here. So here are the things that I learned when I went to Acoma Pueblo, by the way.
One thing, going back for a second, when you're talking about like realizing things aren't the normal cisgender way of thinking of things or stuff like that. Back in 2020, 2021, one of the things that was really interesting to me was famed comic writer Grant Morrison came out as non-binary.
You know,
did you hear about that?
I did not hear about that, but I'm also not surprised.
Yeah, that was my exact reaction too. I'm like, wasn't even surprised. I was like, yeah, it tracks. But
yeah, that tracks for Grant Morrison.
The thing is,
they're just that odd.
What they talked about specifically was like growing up when they were making comics like Doom Patrol and stuff like that, they would incorporate characters that were, the term they used at that time was transsexual. Yeah. And like there were a lot of trans characters showing up. And what they said about it was, here's the growing up, that's the closest word for what I was that they had. It didn't quite fit, but like that's the closest thing I could compare it to. And now
Yeah.
people are talking about non-binary and all these other things, and I'm like, oh, that's a much better word for what I am. I can
Yeah,
actually
that was
identify with something.
yeah, that was my thought when I came across genderqueer, because like up to that point, my exposure to just trans identity in general was movies like To Wong Fu, Thanks for Everything, Julie Newmar. Love that movie. It's great. However, it does get into the sticky, pernicious topic of whether drag queens count as transgender or if they're just gay men. And we're not going to get into that today because there's overlap for both and there is room for both.
Yeah.
But To Wong Fu was really my first exposure to the idea of drag queens. And the thing is, throughout that movie, they interchangeably referred to themselves as gay men and as ladies. And that idea of gender being wibbly wobbly was my first exposure to that. And that and the birdcage, because the birdcage, like Nathan Lane's character does consider themselves as a woman for a good chunk of it, but everybody else is like, you're a man. But they're also in that wibbly wobbly gender space where they can be referred to either way.
Right.
But those two movies were my first exposure to gender being wibbly wobbly. And back then they didn't really have the terminology for non-binary either, which was really frustrating for me because I was like, there is something about this that resonates with me, but it doesn't fit me.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that's interesting to me with a lot of this, because there's this perception with especially some of the older generations and things like that, that some of these are newer phenomena and stuff like that. And it's not that they're new phenomena, it's just there wasn't the language for it. And there wasn't the widespread ability to teach people this language. The internet offered.
Yeah. And again, overlapping with Native American history and how that overlaps with LGBT history. There were old Native American terminologies for it. However, either a lot of it got forcibly censored out, or the words got lost, or the words are so important that they don't talk about it openly with basically white people.
That's fair.
So the generally accepted term is Two-Spirit. And that applies across Native American communities, regardless of like which particular peoples you're talking about.
Right.
But I'm trying to remember where I was going with this particular train of thought.
The importance of language.
The importance of language. Yeah. The thing of it is, it's funny because there were some bits of research that I came across for the queer storytelling project that in the early days of queer activism, it was just gay and lesbian.
Yeah.
However, the understanding of gay and lesbian at the time was really based on gender roles.
Yeah.
The entire reason that homosexuality as a word even exists is because the scientists at the time were trying to describe why it is that women were attracted to women and men were attracted to men. And they came up with the term of inversion. And inversion is this idea of a woman who's attracted to a woman is inverting her gender role. The idea that a man is attracted to a man is inverting his gender role and wanting to play the role of a woman. So gender is wrapped up in all of this. Again, the cult of heterosexuality dictates that men be attracted to women, women be attracted to men, and anything outside of that is a inversion, which is why the word was coined in the first place.
Yeah, like it's one of the things that I've kind of realized, because I was recently at a family reunion and a few people said things that I didn't necessarily agree with.
Yeah.
But one of the things that came up that took me, it actually took me a while to realize what was going on. I realized, oh, you're combining sexuality with gender identity, and they are actually two very different things. And that's
they're
a
two
long
separate things
conversation
now.
that I feel like manage. Yeah.
They're two separate things now.
Yeah.
But that took a lot of back and forth.
Yeah. It's and I don't know, like I also feel like I'm maybe not the best guy to explain a lot of this stuff, because I'm cheering from the sidelines and I'm like, I will do my best.
This is why you have me.
Yes. But yeah, it's like it's I'm trying to think of how to put this.
Okay.
But yeah, like one of the things that I also kind of recognized, like there were a lot of people in my family who I think would see themselves as allies and things like that, but their basis for stuff is decades old and the rules have changed and they're still trying to catch up.
Yeah.
And that's something that I try to help with as best I can. But
yeah, okay.
Mhm.
This is actually something I came across in my research. The idea that like people have to play catch up almost defeats the purpose of it. And also this is something that offshoot of that. Allyship may not be the best word to use. Maybe the best word to use would be coalition, because you are working in coalition with these groups.
Yeah.
But this is something that I picked up while doing research on Black activism. Because hilariously, book I finished recently is called What White People Can Do Next. Love it. Love that book. Also very actionable. Highly recommend that you pick it up. But when I was reading that book, part of the reason that the author of that book had such an issue with the term allyship is because allyship still implies a kind of hierarchy where there is the person who has the power and the agency, who is acting on behalf of the victim. Whereas when you think about it as being in coalition, you are approaching at it from the perspective of equals, and you are working equally with the people that you are working in coalition with.
Is there a good word for a single person within that coalition? Like instead of saying allyship, saying ally. What's the equivalent of that with the word coalition?
I mean, this is getting into real far left territory, but comrade is something I've seen pop up a lot.
Yeah, I can see that also causing a few other problems.
Oh yeah. And there's a lot of like queer commentary and queer history that is very anti-capitalist. A lot.
Yeah. I will say, like, the first time I heard the term ally used for, someone who's cis but supports the full community, I honestly got pretty excited because I'm like, there's actually a term that covers me, and I didn't realize it.
Yeah.
And so like, I do get the problem you're describing. I'd be interested to see what a good alternative would be.
Yeah. And honestly, if ally still fits for you as far as the LGBT community goes, by all means, have that.
By the way, like the concept of catching up and things like that, one of the things I do want to bring up with that, the first time I heard the term ally used for something like that, 2018. Like it was weirdly recently.
Yeah. I've heard ally being used as far back as like, I want to say 2008.
Yeah. But
or something like that.
The thing, my point is kind of that, like, it's weirdly easy to miss a lot of this stuff.
Unless you're like really into the community and you're like not just in coalition, but like actively doing stuff with the community and not just like, I'm trying to think of the best way to put this, but like working in tandem with them.
Yeah.
And getting that exposure, unless you're getting that, there's a lot of this stuff that you're going to miss.
Yeah. But it's why I try to help anyone I know who hasn't been exposed to it, who is trying to catch up.
Yeah.
The big example with this isn't really putting them on blast. My parents are finally getting good with they, them pronouns.
Oh, good.
I have a bunch of friends who use them, and they are like finally getting to the point where they are correcting themselves, which
good.
Which I'm just like, this is great. Like they're in their 70s. They're actually learning. They're progressing. Like, don't let anyone say you cannot change and grow.
That whole self-actualization thing. We talked about that way early on, but like part of self-actualizing is realizing that you don't know everything.
Yeah.
You can always learn new things.
Oh, go ahead.
If I may, the topic of trying to keep up. This was something that was actually basically photocopied this from one of the books and just highlighted it. But I'll go ahead and read it out loud for you.
Yes.
It says here, perhaps the old/new and wrong/right binaries need to be resisted. Otherwise, we risk repeating the mistakes of the past, falling into intergenerational wars, and remaining insecure about whether we're up to date with terminologies, ideas, and practices. And this was part of, I want to say this, I'm going to double check which book this was in.
I like that it appears to be comic.
Yes, it's Queer, a Graphic History. So it's all comics.
Yeah.
Yeah. Highly recommend. They did Queer, a Graphic History and Gender, a Graphic Guide. Same creators, also comic format. Highly recommend both. So yeah, that part of queer theory, queer theory is doing their damnedest to resist artificial binaries, and that binary of like old and new really applies to like the whole like catching up idea. But like any progress is good progress.
Yes.
Any kind of coalition is good coalition for the most part. I mean, we're not gonna get into some of the weird stickiness of Huey P. Newton right now.
Okay.
But yes.
Yeah, what you're saying I'm very happy about, because like one of the things that's a pet peeve of mine, and I know people who do this, but when someone starts to make that progress, make that journey, realizing I've had ideas that I don't think are correct anymore, or may never have been correct, and I'm learning and I'm, trying to make this progress. And people's response were like, it's about time. Where you been? And I'm like, that is not helpful.
Yeah,
this person is on a journey. They are making positive progress. Support that so they keep making progress.
Yeah. There's something to be said about so the YouTuber Innuendo Studios did a video about this. It was part of their alt-right playbook series. Because this is he describes basically a spectrum of political thought, and unfortunately, a lot of left-leaning people sit on the one end of the spectrum that says people are at specific points in their journeys, but they're not as far as I am. I have to help them catch up.
Yeah.
But then there are other people who fall on the other end of the spectrum that's like, I don't need improving. I already know enough. And then the anarchists are outside of that spectrum being like, this entire system is problematic and we need to stop. The more research that I do on like queer history, Native American history, and all of these other things for these projects that I'm working on and all these comics that I'm working on, the more I understand anarchism. Like, yeah, I'm not going to get into that right now, but like, yeah, I do a lot of research for the comics and stuff that I do. Like there's at least 2 semesters worth of African art history that I did before working on The Legend of Jamie Roberts. And I'm so glad that I did that research. And also really glad that I did my Native American research before working on The Legend of Jamie Roberts, because a lot of that influence can work its way into there, but not in an appropriative way. I can be like, okay, let's take the concept of the third gender that was really prevalent in a lot of Native American cultures and bring that into the society. But we'll come up with a new word for it, because I like making conlangs, constructed languages, and I just like making up bullcrap words. Like, fun fact, when I was a kid, I used to want to be a linguist and speak multiple languages because I thought that was like the coolest thing ever. Yeah. And then Google Translate happened, and I'm like, okay, that negates me from having to learn all of that.
Yeah. Now, I've actually, so growing up a educational specialist, I had some sessions with, and one of the things they said is that I would never be good at foreign languages and things like that, which has always rankled me a little bit, but in general been true. Never been that good with languages. I like to study dialects and things like that. I have, however, spent almost a year now doing Japanese Duolingo.
Okay.
And
Okay.
it's fun because I can actually kind of start to really get how other languages might be constructed radically different and it's blowing my mind a little bit.
Yeah.
In a good
It's
way.
funny because Japanese is actually considered one of the hardest languages for a native English speaker to pick up, aside from Arabic.
I've had classes in it throughout the years. Like
Mm-hmm.
believe it or not, my middle school taught it. And I was like, yes, I will do that instead of Spanish or French.
Okay. Wait, taught Arabic or Japanese?
Japanese.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I was in high school when 9/11 happened. They definitely weren't teaching Arabic.
Oh, yeah.
A
Mm-hmm.
very conservative high school too. But so
Yeah.
I had a few years of Japanese. I've periodically poked my head back into it, but Duolingo, very problematic program. A lot of weird things about this thing, but it's better than not doing anything. And I'm basically just doing a lesson a day.
I mean, you're not wrong. You're
Yeah.
not wrong. It's how
But
I was able to brush up on a lot of Navajo.
yeah.
So
But like one of the things I started to realize is if you try to say the exact translation of what you're reading in Japanese, it almost feels like Yoda talk because things are structured differently. Like, let's see, I play soccer on weekends is Shumatsu wa Saka o shimasu. But the structure of that is on weekends, soccer I play.
okay, so it's a lot like Latin or German in that way.
Kind of. Although it's another thing with that, I said I play. There was no pronoun in there.
Yeah.
It's contextual. That's another thing that's really fun to figure out is like it's you, we, I, all the same unless you put in specific things for it, which is kind of fun. But yeah.
It's kind of like learning how Chinese does not have the verb form to be.
Yeah.
So trying to translate Shakespeare, particularly Hamlet, into Chinese, they have to find a different word. And I think the word that they often use translates to continue or not to continue.
I was looking for so for a lot of naming stuff in D&D and things like that, I'll often do anagrams of or things like that related to other words. I'll sometimes use foreign languages as reference for some of it. Yeah. And there's one thing where I tried to use Hebrew, and I could not for the life of me find it written out in Arabic characters. It was all written out in actual Hebrew. And I was like, can I get I want to see what the transliteration of this is. And they said, we can't. There are no vowels. I'm like, oh, right. I forgot that.
Yeah. Yiddish is all consonants. All the vowels are implied.
Well, Yiddish, actually, it's easier because it's got a little bit of Germanic thrown in there. So there are vowels, but full Hebrew, there are no vowels.
Yeah. And full Arabic is the same way.
Yeah.
Which is why it's considered the more difficult.
Yeah, it definitely gets confusing. Also, I believe, is it Greek or Hebrew where you alternate going left or going right? It's one of those.
I think Greek.
Yeah,
but don't quote me on that. I would have to ask a Jewish friend of mine because he would know.
I think Hebrew is written right to left, and it stays that way. I know one of them is able to alternate. I know the Egyptians did it in any direction they felt like doing.
The Egyptians, they made their own rules.
It's true. And I mean, to be frank, a lot of cultures ended up copying them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because, I mean, they were the first for a reason.
All right. We got way off the rails on this, and it was awesome.
Yeah, we did. We hardly did traditional interview questions at all.
Oh, this is what happens when we hang out. It's great. And if you want to see more of that, this weekend at the Small Press and Alternative Comic Expo, the both of us will be at the Canon Wright Productions table.
Yeah, we're sharing a table, baby.
Yep. And we're right next to the Columbus Cartoon Coalition table, which is going to be real convenient.
Heck yeah.
Yeah. So just to start wrapping things up, where can people find you on the internets?
The easiest place to find me is going to be kelcicrawford.com. That is KELCID Crawford.com. Everything that I do is linked on there.
Hold on. I need to create a banner for you because for some reason I don't have it on here.
Probably because you've been interviewing a lot of other creatives.
No, I have an entire folder for you because this is also using my StreamYard.
Oh, okay.
Somehow it has your Patreon, your crowdfunder, your store envy, and a tiny URL for never ending, but it doesn't have Kelci.
Oh man, a lot of those links that you have saved aren't even relevant anymore. Like I'm not on Patreon, I'm not on Store Envy. Yeah. But everything that is current, KelciDCrawford.com. By the way, can I just take a second to shout out? I have a new role-playing game coming out June 17th.
Mm-hmm.
I have a new role-playing game coming out June 17th. It's called Toe Beans and Broomsticks. You get to play as cats, crows, dogs, or owls who can cast wild magic. And it's got a lot of like Saturday morning cartoon vibes where you get to battle the forces of evil with your friends and you collaborate to cast magic together.
I've seen early versions of this and it looks really fun.
Good. Yes, you were one of the first people that I reached out to for feedback on it.
Yeah. I'm sorry I haven't given more feedback, but I was at aforementioned family reunion.
Fair enough. I think I've gotten it to a point now where like, well, I have a base version and a deluxe version, but to find out more about that, you just got to head on over to KelciDCrawford.com and sign up for my email newsletter, because my email newsletter peeps will be the first people to get dibs on this free RPG. Highly recommend that you check it out. The newsletter is also just a great way to keep tabs on all of the webcomic projects that I do and everything else that's going on and all my convention appearances and stuff like that. But also, free RPG, June 17th. There you go.
One other thing that occurs to me we should throw out there, because it will be available at our table at S.P.A.C.E.
Yes.
So Kelci was the cover artist on an anthology for Canon Ray Productions, What the Gnomes Know, which we will be formally debuting at S.P.A.C.E. this year. But as part of that, Kelci also did a particularly brilliant set of sticker designs that are tied gnomes. These are just an assortment I grabbed.
We have look at those. They're so cute.
They're great. Which ones we got here? I definitely
we have oh gosh, really put me on the spot there. I know the circle one is intersex.
Yes.
The purple, white, and green is genderqueer.
Mm-hmm.
I want to say the last one over there, I want to say that one is
I can bring up the list if you need. I have a picture guide.
Yeah, you might need to bring up the list. It's either aromantic or non-binary. I cannot remember which. It might not even be either of those.
Not only am I going to bring this up, but I'm going to share it on the screen so people can see all the stickers anyway.
Yeah, there you go. I should really know these things because I have an assortment of Pride stickers also available for sale.
Like in a weird way, it's comforting knowing that this is not just confusing to me.
Yeah, no, it's the thing is there's a couple of flag designs that are only like one or two colors different from each other, and it makes things extra confusing.
All right, here's the good one. I have to be careful. They changed how presenting works in here, by the way. So.
Oh, that's weird. Okay.
But I can bring it up. I'm a little more used to it. Oh, that's weird. It looks different than it did the other day. It looks better than it did the other day, though, which is a good thing.
Well, I'll take better.
Window. There we go.
Oh, it's working. Ah, there it is.
Here they are. I feel like the color's off, but it should give
you yeah. The one that you were holding up, I was completely off. It was gender fluid. But yeah, we have all of these stickers. Actually, I don't think we have the old polyamory right now, but we have the new polyamory. No, you have the old polyamory.
No, the old polyamory is here. I don't think we have that sticker in stock right now. But we are going to have all the other ones here.
Yeah. The old polyamory is up there next to the new one.
Yep. But these stickers are completely awesome, and we have a ton of them, and we'll be happy to get them to you.
Oh, love it. Love it.
All created by Kelci.
Yes, I drew them, I formatted them, I put the pride flags in there. It's great.
Yes, it was an absolutely brilliant idea.
I can't believe I forgot what the gender fluid flag looked like for a minute. It's one of the ones that's not often requested when I take the pride flag designs that I have to conventions. The ones that I get asked about the most are bisexual, trans, and usually like genderqueer or non-binary.
Yeah. Gender fluid and non-binary are frustratingly close to each other for me.
Yeah, that was where I was getting mixed up because they are pretty close.
I had some real trouble when I was doing the mailing because I just, whenever people requested one or the other, I'm like, wait, hold on. Where's the picture?
Yeah, this is why you keep reference files for things, folks.
Absolutely. But hey, we were really happy to fulfill it. We do also have non-pride related stickers such as Surfing Gnome.
I love that one.
And Gnome is where the heart is.
That one's really good too.
Yes, by various artists that were involved in our group.
Yep.
So yeah, definitely something to keep an eye out for when you're at S.P.A.C.E this weekend, Ohio Expo Center, June 10th and 11th.
Will you also have copies of Less Than Secret there?
Absolutely. We will have copies of our first, and I have a copy right here, actually.
Oh, yay, because Less Than Secret was the first anthology that Ben's company, Cannon Wright Productions, put out there.
That's right. And in fact, one other thing that's fun about this, both Kelci and I each had stories in here, both of which were finalists for this year's Space Prize.
For this year's Space Prize?
Well, for this past year's Space, the Space Prize that they are giving out at this thing.
Okay, cool.
We have officially received notification that someone else won, but we were finalists, and that's incredible with how much stuff went out. Like 2 stories from here received it. And I was rooting for you because Day in the Life of Mothman was great.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Your story was about the Mothman.
Yes.
People in Ohio buy this comic.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, and I'm sure I haven't figured it out exactly, but I always like to do bundle deals. So we'll have some kind of bundle with this. And
I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
Well, we have paperback and hardcover going to be available for this and for What the Gnomes Know. So definitely check it out.
Also, if I can just give a shout out for one of your things. So Ben did a short video adapting his short comic about the Chupacabra. The short is called A Mother's Love. It's on his YouTube channel. I did some voice work for it,
which was really, really fun.
Yes, it was. I got to make chupacabra noises. It was great. I got to weird out my cats for like 20 minutes.
Just real quick, that is how you can find my YouTube channel. I don't have a link to the actual video, but you can find it there and you'll be able to find it real quick.
Yes, highly recommend you give it a watch. It is great editing. It's real good.
Absolutely. And I'm planning on doing the same thing with No Man's Land, which is my story from this one. Hopefully with Ian helping me with the voice on that. Ian Klesch was the writer on that story. And I kind of want him to do the reading of the recording, which I think would be really, really cool.
That would be really cool.
And then I'll get to do all the old guy grunts and robot sounds. This should already sound like a story you guys want to hear.
Yeah, because you get old man noises and robot sounds. I mean, who doesn't want that?
I like doing old man fun. Where am I?
I get to sometimes play old people in the D&D campaign that I run.
Have you seen my films? I don't know. I remember fighting the Kaiser.
I mean, there's this voice here, but also I have this voice, which is just basically my grandmother. Honey.
Actually, that another one that we ought to recommend because we were both in it and got to do a lot of silly voices. And if you got this far, you probably like D&D because we talked about it a lot.
Yeah.
But if you check out the Cannon Wright YouTube channel, I just realized this is actually the channel you need to see for A Mother's Love. I forgot I did it on this channel.
But yes, I think I know what you're talking about. Ben and I
Yeah.
were part of a Dungeons and Dragons one-shot campaign that was unlocked as a stretch goal when Less Than Secret Encrypted Anthology was on Kickstarter. You can watch that one-shot at the link on the screen. Yeah, I'm almost pointing at it. Hold on, I'm
Yep.
gonna do
You
the
pretty much got it.
ha.
The D&D Extravaganza Hunt for the Yeti,
Yes.
which once again put my video editing skills from college to the test. And I really want to do more of that stuff because it's exhausting, but it's fun.
Oh man, this is why I don't really like do video editing very much.
It's so much work. Like
It is part of the process of being a creative is just it is facing the fear and doing it anyway, and it is because of that that you discover what it is that you like to do and what you do not like to do. And
Yeah.
I've discovered I do not like to video edit.
Yeah, and one of the other things with that, just because it's a good thing to always remind people, the most important thing you can do with being a creative is do it. It's not going to be perfect, but you're going to learn along the way and get better.
Yeah. Also, you don't have to make everything public. Not everything that you make needs to be shared.
Yeah.
You have the right to privacy.
Absolutely.
This is something that I feel like a lot of people have forgotten, particularly in this day and age.
Yeah, especially with social media, the idea that I always am of the opinion that the worst thing you can do with something like social media or any social platform is turn it into a diary, because it's not.
Yeah, it really isn't.
Yeah.
It really isn't. But we're not going to get into that because
we did an entire video about that.
We did an entire video about the fall of social media and what creatives can do aside from social media.
Oh, hello, Director 240.
Hello.
Can't wait to see us in space. I can't wait to see you tomorrow because we are interviewing Director 240 tomorrow.
I'm definitely tuning in for that one.
Yeah, same time, same channel. So we will have announcements going up for that very soon. Thank you for joining us tonight, Director.
Heck yeah. Now, just to really promote this, so past interviews that you have done live streams of are available as replays on this channel. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
That is correct. Not only are they on this channel, well, there are two channels you might be watching this on. It is on the Columbus Cartoon Coalition YouTube channel. Let me see if I've got something ready to go for that, because I really should. Nope, I'll make one. This is in my library.
Okay, so the other place would be your YouTube channel?
No, the other place is the S.P.A.C.E Facebook channel. Those are the two places we're posting this. And if you don't follow it, it's the Small Press and Alternative Comic Expo on Facebook. Highly recommend you follow it. You'll get notified whenever they have anything going on. And we've been simultaneously casting there and to the YouTube channel you see below. So highly recommend following them both. Columbus Cartoon Coalition is doing great things for comics in the local area by networking, especially a lot of the younger cartoonists who are still trying to get their foot in the door.
Oh, heck yeah.
And Space has been a mainstay of comics in the eastern part of the Midwest for 20 years. Like when I was in Vermont, everyone was talking about Space. Like it's a big deal.
It's a pretty big deal. It's also one of the best places to really network with local creatives.
Yeah, if you want to meet, here's the other thing, like a lot of creatives, especially in some of the older generation, aren't as big on the social media or on, like, they don't use Discord and they don't communicate that way. This is a great opportunity to interact with those people, and a lot of them are so much fun. Like, honestly, if we had more of a chance to do more interviews, we would have been pulling in more of them. But
I would have loved to have seen you talk to Canada Keck. That would have been great.
Honestly, it would have been lined up. We just didn't have time. Like, we just ran out. So apologies, Canada. I know you would have done it, and it would have been amazing. We will do that in the future with you at some point, because that is someone to talk to.
Oh, absolutely.
We ought to wrap this up because we've already gone like twice the amount of time that most of these streams go. Which
you and I could talk for days about stuff.
Normal for you and me, but like we definitely have done this. So Space is this weekend, Ohio Expo Center, June 10th and 11th. Please show up and show your support for the indie comics community, and we will hopefully see you there.
Yes. Hope to see you there. Thank you so much for watching. You are awesome.
Rock on, guys, and never stop drawing.